Gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core Podcast. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Fert Derby and Lord Uther. Gentlemen, welcome back to Starfleet Academy. And the crew here today is talking Season 3, Star Trek, the original series, and another episode where I think we're going to have some mixed feelings, to say the least. We got a bit of a preview of this on the last episode with Lord Uther, but today we're discussing And the Children Shall Lead. And I don't want to steal any thunder from Fert Derby here. I'm going to turn it right over. Fert Derby, tell us a little bit more about this entry into Season 3.
Thank you, Urza Master. Thank you, Lord Uther. Thank you, Warp Core fanatics. Here we are in deep in Season 3, Episode 4, And the Children Shall Lead. First aired on October 11th, 1968. We're just weeks away from a pivotal presidential election that year. So the war in Vietnam is raging. There's the space race continues to go back and forth between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. There's a lot going on right now in the world. So what better time to introduce a brand new episode of Trek that sadly isn't quite as brand new as probably Gene Roddenberry and John Meredith Lucas were hoping for. Let me explain. First, who made it? Directed by Marvin Chomsky. Mr. Chomsky cut his teeth with television, The Wild Wild West and Gunsmoke and Hawaii Five-0. And for his work in television over his career, he won 4 Emmys, so he was a decorated television director. He also worked on Roots, the landmark 1977 miniseries based on Alex Haley's novel, which gave us a young LeVar Burton, Louis Gossett Jr., to but name a few. And he also directed a criminally underrated James Garner movie for the big screen, Tank, in 1984, in which James Garner plays an Army colonel who has his own Sherman tank, and when his son C. Thomas Howell runs afoul of local law enforcement, Garner breaks him out of jail and then makes a run for the state lines to get him away from the corrupt law enforcement in Georgia or Mississippi or whatever state they happen to be in. And it's a race. It's like a slow motion Smokey and the Bandit chase between the cops, the helicopters, and the Sherman tank, which is armed. And he sets off the cannon a couple of times to great effect. So criminally underrated. Check it out on your favorite streamers, particularly if you like James Garner. He's a trooper. He shows up and does a good job. And the Children Shall Lead was written by Edward J. Lasko. He's a new writer. Marvin is a new director for us in Trek, and Edward is a new writer. And Edward, he basically spent his career in television, did the TV adaptation of Planet of the Apes, Charlie's Angels, Starsky and Hutch, The Fall Guy with Lee Majors, just recently updated by Ryan Gosling in summer movie theaters, and Jan Michael Vincent and Ernest Borgnine's helicopter classic Airwolf. So those were Edward Lasko's roots there. And together they came up with a tale of a band of lovable but mischievous scamps, once again asserting control over the Enterprise and her crew, guided on by a glowing green ball of exposition, who was played at the time by criminal defense attorney Marvin Belly. Now, Marvin had no acting experience whatsoever, as I recall, but he had a yin or a yang for getting in front of the camera. And so somehow it ended up to leading him being cast in this role as Grogan. And funny fact, Marvin Belly, the attorney, is later played in David Fincher's Zodiac by Succession's leading actor Brian Cox. So Brian Cox, picture this, is playing Marvin Belly in the movie Zodiac. And in the movie Zodiac, Marvin Belly, aka Brian Cox, is interviewed during one of the segments about the Bay Area serial killer. And he is asked about his time acting in Star Trek, to which Brian Cox, as Marvin Belly, has to formulate a response. So a very deep dive meta. And if you ever saw Zodiac and like, I wonder what they're talking about. They're talking about this episode and The Children Shall Lead. So when you're done, Warp Core fans, enjoying our take on this episode, go grab your Blu-ray or DVD or VHS of Zodiac and find the moment where Brian Cox has to defend his appearance appearing on Gene Roddenberry's Space Odor. You'll get a kick out of it. Maybe more of a kick than you will out of And the Children Shall Lead. But we digress. The Star Trek franchise has dealt with unruly adolescents before, mostly in the first season. And we've talked about them here on the Warp Core. If you go check our archives, you'll see that we've discussed such previous installments as Charlie X in Warp Core number 30. We had the kids running around an apocalyptic burnt-out society in Miri, which we talked about in Warp Core 33. We had the Corbomite maneuver, in which a young, playful alien was goofing with the Enterprise crew, and then Kirk turned the tables on them. That was in Warp Core 34. So this idea that teach the children, let them lead the way, they will soon try to make the Enterprise's mission a real headache. It's been done before. And I think without a doubt, and without, with all due respect, this is not as terrific an episode or as memorable an episode or so forth as those previous installments. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the Klingon blood wine, because I think I know what they were going for. I think I understand what the inspirations behind this episode may have had. I'm doing a little bit of speculation here. When Gene Roddenberry launched the show, he wanted science fiction writers and he wanted science fiction voices to help contribute to his vision. And they wanted to go out and get the Isaac Asimovs and the Robert Heinleins to, and so forth, to be able to, give voice to what the future could look like or what possible perils lay on the horizon. And one of those authors who was, cranking stuff out, short stories, novels, novellas at this time, was Ray Bradbury. And Ray, if you're a fan, and I am, often did several stories in his eclectic science fiction, fantasy, horror mix involving twisted children or children forced to take on adult roles because society had wiped them out or things of that nature. And that, coupled with the singular image of Nichelle Nichols as Uhura seeing an altered vision of herself in grotesque old age makeup, that has echoes of Something Wicked This Way Comes, Mr. Dark's promises of eternal life that then quickly backfire once you've given him what he wants. So it's this viewer's supposition that some of these elements of this story were inspired by the writings of Ray Bradbury. And I mean, it would totally fit. I think another source of inspiration could have been the 1960 science fiction B film that had developed a cult following, Village of the Damned, which in and of itself was based on a 1957 novel, The Midwich Cuckoos. And in essence, aliens come down from Earth, appearing to us as children, and using telekinesis and mental powers and powers of persuasion take over a small town and threaten the inhabitants and then later planet Earth. Village of the Damned had been, released in theaters and was circulating out there 8 years before this episode aired. You can see some obvious parallels. Auteur director John Carpenter remade the film Village of the Damned in 1995 with Christopher Reeve in his last big screen role before his accident that left him a paraplegic. It also starred Kirstie Alley and Michael Pare of Streets of Fire fame. So if you haven't sought that one out yet, it's a fun, and Meredith Salinger, The Journey of Natty Gann, and voice actress now for Star Wars, Tales of the Empire. Meredith Salinger was a troubled, pregnant teen in Carpenter's remake. All of this goes up to add, folks, to say that I understand that this episode probably had promise on the page and had some good intentions. So it's not completely damning. However, execution is at least 50% of the recipe. And I don't, as somebody who wants to see a good evil kids story, I don't think we quite got there, particularly because we had such a blatant and obvious glowy green exposition character played by Marvin Belly, who literally just stands on the bridge at one point and announces his evil plans within earshot of the entire crew and so forth. It's not as if he's only appearing to the children or he's somehow, in their consciousness. He's just right there saying, "We will take the bridge. You will, destroy these puny humans, and we will." I'm sure Kirk and Spock are looking at each other like, "Really? We can hear you. Like, we're right here." Leonard Nimoy, as of 1986, had put on the record that even with the embarrassment he felt during Spock's brain, he felt this was singularly the worst episode of Star Trek he'd ever been associated with. I don't know if you can tell that from his performance. I do see a little bit of tenseness with James Kirk until in the third act they allow him to go a little bit crazy again, and I'm sure that'll come up in our group discussion here. We get the wide-eyed Shatner, the "I'm losing control. I've lost control of the Enterprise." Any stand-up comic who's made fun of William Shatner in the last 40 years, I think these are the episodes that they are citing when they do their impersonations and impressions of him. It's like, take it along with some of his acting in the previous installment that we covered, The Paradise Syndrome. On the one hand, yes, he gets to ham it up a little, and I'm sure he's trying to do the best with the material that he's given. But there are moments that seemingly for me, it's not breaking the fourth wall, but it's just undercutting when we get a good gravitas Kirk. And I think we get some of that good gravitas Kirk in this when he doesn't, he's kind of glaring at the kids. Like he wants to help them process their grief, as McCoy is urging him to do. But at the same time, he doesn't want to put up with a lot of nonsense. And when they're running around the bridge and doing the ring around the rosy moves and all that, you can just see the look on his face like, man, I'd like to take one of them over my knee and just give him a good spanking. And that's the Kirk that we cherish and high five over. And I think sometimes that gets undone when you allow him to go bug-eyed and and we get both here. So I think I clearly am a fan of the former and not the latter. Some other, Chapel's back. It's nice to see her try to pull some babysitting duty there. The security guards don't appear to be very effective. Kirk says, "Hey, follow these kids and make sure they don't get into any trouble," but they just kind of stand around there. I love the Black Lodge. Of course, they didn't know it was the Black Lodge at the time, but Kirk speaking in a distorted version to the security guard. It sounded very Twin Peaks to these ears, so I did enjoy that. And Scotty, apparently he's not getting a haircut, but I did like to see him try and fight off his entire engineering staff before succumbing to the madness. And let's be honest, once the kids have fully taken over, there's about 10 minutes of this episode where the stakes are high, and you are like, oh man, it's just like Cybok putting the spin on everybody. Everybody, Sulu and Chekhov and Uhura and Scotty, and everybody is affected by these hallucinations and illusions, and like you're saying to yourself as a Star Trek fan, so how are they going to solve this? And to its credit, I think the solution, basically forcing the kids to deal viscerally, with trauma, showing them happy scenes on the planet Trigaris, and then showing the aftermath and the after effects. I mean, that's tough love. It's a slap across the face emotionally, and I'm all for that. I just don't think overall that they mastered whatever tone they were going for. We never get into full terror. We never get into full horror, and as a result, again, we're dealing with child actors and children of the 1960s. There's a little too precious and a little too precocious, I think, to really get a Ray Bradbury. I mean, if you go back and read some of his short stories in this genre, he goes dark. These are killer kids, or these are kids without mercy, empathy, and I don't think Trek was ready, as a family-friendly show to push those boundaries. But had they might have had something really special. As it is, and Urza Master might agree to it, this is kind of like a B- X-Files Monster of the Week kind of show. Not part of the established lore. But it's Trek, and you don't want to just completely dismiss it. But I was disappointed by the ultimate end result. Convince me, Urza Master, and Lord Uther, that this is actually a fine hour of television.
Normally, I like to swoop in on these ones and be like, well, actually, you guys, this is better than you think. It's definitely a Ray Bradbury story gone wrong.
Right.
I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One being budget. The special effect that they use on our clown costume lawyer is, even for the time, cheesy.
And that pennant.
Making him like
the Federation of Planet the pennant that Kirk is playing with. I mean, it's like it was the worst sports
UFP pennant. It's pretty rough, to say the least. I like what they were trying to do. I think if Strange New Worlds did this episode today, it would be unbelievably scary. It would probably be exciting. It'd keep you on the edge of your seat of your pants, whatever you want to say. I really think it could be a great, Ray Bradbury-esque horror sci-fi story. I think where it falls incredibly short is the fact that, TV at the time was not ready for that. And you probably just couldn't do the things you needed to do to make this episode successful. You couldn't have children who are, basically loosed upon their dark side, right? There had to be some preservation of innocence, some sort of a positive payoff, because you haven't had these evil children stories hit the big screen or the small screen yet in a real, tangible way. We haven't even had Willy Wonka at this point, which showcases, I think, in another sense, surrealistic perhaps, exactly what Ray Bradbury was driving at. Is like every child has these dark impulses that will eventually be their undoing. And only the child who is truly challenged on those can overcome that. And that's ultimately what they have to do in the stories. They have to challenge the children in ways they've never been challenged. They have to give them an adult problem, death to confront. And it's a great story. But the execution is abysmal. It's really bad. I get the dealing with death in the beginning where they're all obviously traumatized because they're brainwashed, you had me. I was like, all right, this is good. The Ring Around the Rosie thing was a little weird, but it's like, okay, if you think about, they're all in a period of mental breakdown, you know, and they're at their most susceptible. They've just been convinced essentially to drive their parents mad, killing their parents. They should be in this weird state of shock that's almost unbreakable. What I find a little bit unsuccessful about how they delivered is they really didn't build it up very well. Like they tried to confront him on the planet's surface, and then they just were like busy, and did their stupid game, and it's like that could have been better. If the oldest boy would have been like the ringleader who, you know, leads their trauma, and he's like trying to protect the rest of them by keeping them in the brainwash, but he's sort of aware of what's going on, even though he's the one kind of facilitating. You could still have your alien ghost interloper who's driving this for, nefarious reasons. But I think, honestly, if you took that part of it out and you have these kids just simply dealing with trauma because they've been gifted some alien power by an unknown source where they were able to control minds, because you give that to any group of children and they're going to end up causing chaos and destruction and then regret it later. That would have been a great story. They sort of reverse animorphs. Instead of becoming, these superhero kids, they become these supervillain kids, and they have to deal with the emotional fallout of that. That's a great Star Trek episode. That would have been fantastic. But they just sort of, they're playing to the fiddle of the time, really. Is that, it has to be the result of an evil, they literally call it evil influence, because kids can't be evil in the late 60s. Not to mention the fact that the world right now in which this episode was produced is going through probably one of the most evil periods, at least for the United States and certainly for Vietnam, ever. So they have to, balance out the fact that people are taxed a bit right now on their heavy, they're seeing really nasty stuff on the news. We could draw a parallel to today. And you just can't bombard them with more complex emotions. You have to give them something simple, some sort of an easy payoff. One, because that's just the nature of the time, and two, because that's what people really needed. That being said, it does not make for compelling television. Even of the era, I think it was unsuccessful. I don't think it lacked the components of a successful episode. I think it really did just fall short because you never really got out of that exposition till the last 10 minutes. You were in this downward spiral, which was very, 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 very slow, putting the Enterprise and its crew into a deep crisis, which, if you get that done in the first act, okay. Then you have a whole middle segment of Kirk realizing, he's under mind control, breaking free of that, slowly breaking out each crew member until the kids' powers are stripped away, and then in the denouement you realize it's not just the children, they were controlled by an alien force. That might have worked better. But instead you get, 40 minutes, 30 minutes of exposition, and then in 10 minutes they kind of rush through the conclusion. This one needed Gene Roddenberry to do a bunch of rewrites to try and make it successful. At least we didn't get somebody in an Easter Bunny costume. Or, the kids didn't have to fight themselves in an alternative reality for all of time. But I can't.
You're setting the bar low, but yes, that's fine.
So, I'm dying to hear Lord Uther's thoughts, because he was fired up last week on this one.
Look, any time we talk about writing and acting having to kind of come together, right? Anytime the actor has to tell you in the episode what's happening, there's a problem. And we see that throughout. It's almost like they brought in this Jor-El look-alike to, expound upon what the kids should do and what's going to happen next. And anytime I see kids, playing rock, paper, scissors to decide the fate of the Enterprise crew, I have a slight issue with that as well. I think we're seeing the beginning of this, to Fert's point, this Bill Shatner overacting. It's almost like he had to do that this episode, or he's just starting to become this Bill Shatner who's full of himself. Like we kind of start knowing in his later stages of life here, just kind of thinking that he has that bravado about him, or that gravitas in a sense, that he's this great, actor that can do all these things, right? And so to draw the dramatic pauses, yeah. I even had down, it's funny because I had Kirk does Twin Peaks and then Man from Another Place. I was seeing a lot of that. Maybe David Lynch got some inspiration. Maybe that's the only thing that this episode, kind of did right. I just, this is awful. I don't know what else to say besides it's a waste of, I shut it off, and I don't think I've really ever shut off an episode. And spoiler alert, this is going to be my lowest rated Warp Core ever. It was bad. I don't think there was any saving it. And if this is a sign of things to come, because I will admit I don't think I've seen most of season 3. Now we kind of know maybe why they wind up getting rid of it. I don't know. It was so bad. I just can't. I'm speechless, which is sometimes a rarity.
I have to say, if the purpose of remaking or rebooting something besides a naked cash grab is to perhaps rehabilitate or maybe improve upon something that missed the mark, then I absolutely think Paramount, even in their current state of flux and uncertainty, I absolutely think that they should be pushing the Strange New World crew to maybe revisit and not do a slavish scene-by-scene remake, but maybe explore these concepts in this with the kind of gravity and horror that we can now probably get onto streaming television and so forth. We've had The Omen, we've had all sorts of looks at not so nice children over the years, and maybe the audience is ready for something that could really but could do both, not just give me killer kids, but give me the processing of the grief in such a way that feels authentic and true to the emotional times. Because yes, kids right now are growing up traumatized from everything that's going on in the world, from 9/11 to the homelessness to, all these things that are assaulting them on their screens, even a lack of connection with others because they spend all their time on their screens. Like this is a very fertile environment that I think would fit very well now in an updated. So if you're listening, Strange New Worlds, and you don't have all your season 3, season 4 episodes blocked out yet, this might be one worth revisiting on the chance that you could make something truly special and invigorating. Whereas this one may have fallen short of our standards, you could elevate.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I think this is an episode ripe for remake. And I'm not a fan of remakes. I'm not a fan of having to echo or rehash or, I love original stories. And as much as I know we can complain about them because, they don't always meet our expectations, especially say if it's a new Star Wars story, or even a new Star Trek story. I think this is one where, because the mark was missed by such a long shot, you have ample opportunity to recover. I don't know how you do it. I don't know that there's a specific formula for making this a win. I agree. A shot-for-shot remake is not going to float the boat here. You're going to have to reinvent this process somewhat. But I would trust the writers of Trek today absolutely to do this because they have done a brilliant job rewriting essentially Captain Pike's story. So, with that, we get to our Warp Core ratings. I have a feeling we are going to get some unique ones that we haven't heard in a while or haven't heard at all. And I'm going to go with Lord Uther first because he's promising his lowest rating thus far ever on the Warp Core podcast. This is a first, fans. So if you were not a subscriber, hit that button now. Make sure to click the notification icon. Drop us a comment with what you thought of this episode in preparation for Lord Uther's Warp Core rating. Go.
I thought the alternative factor was a big pile of doo-doo. This one takes the doo-doo cake, is about the best way I could put it. I am ejecting the Warp Core completely. I'm not even going to try and seal the rip in space that's occurred because of this episode. I'm going to let that tear in space-time just suck this entire episode into it so it never exists again. But just because it's titled Star Trek, it gets a half a Warp Core from me, and that's probably being generous. But just, I don't have the powder, Captain. Like, it's just bad. Like, get rid of it. Just snap it out of existence. Q, where are you? Just get rid of it. That's exactly right. Urza?
I like the alternative factor better. For sure. I'm going to give this one Warp Core out of 7. I think it had some of the bones to make a good episode, and it had a lot missing. That's all I can really say.
I guess I'm playing the part of Urza Master this week, longtime Warp Core fans. I've developed my affection for Star Trek over the years. It may not run quite as deep as my passion for that other space franchise that we talk about here at Pending Rebrand. Make sure you're checking out our Graying Jedi podcast if that's what interests you. But I wasn't. We've talked about episodes that were really, I thought, poorly executed in the past. We've referenced the alternative factor, the apple, who mourns for Adonis, Cat's Paw, up and down the line, the gamesters of Triskelion. I don't feel that this episode stumbles to that level. I was disappointed, as you said. But because of the whole, at least again, playing to me, the Ray Bradbury illusions and the other things that could have driven this, I think the bones are there. I just wanted better, and the fact that the lead actor who played the children, Tommy, the character, this was someone, Craig Hunley is how he was credited. He later changed his name to Craig Huxley. And Craig went on to invent a musical instrument called the blaster beam. And the blaster beam, which was something in the very late 70s, it may still be kicking around, but it's more on the antique side, more like Kirk's reading glasses given to him by Bones McCoy in Star Trek II. But the blaster beam, when played, created this gonging, metallic, oppressive sort of sound. And it was used extensively by Jerry Goldsmith in the score for Star Trek The Motion Picture in 1979. You'll hear a lot of it with the Klingons on camera, as well as V'ger. It's a definitive sound effects / musical piece. You can't miss it if you screen that movie or listen to the soundtrack. It also appeared that same year in Disney's The Black Hole, that John Barry used the blaster beam. So just the fact that a child actor giving a middling performance ended up creating his own musical instrument, and that was later repurposed and used on Star Trek The Motion Picture. I mean, come on, that's a feel-good American story if there ever was one. I'm giving this one 3, just like I gave the Paradise Syndrome last week. Sure, that's way too high, but just color me this week a senseless optimist. And I don't want to see Trek plumbing those depths. And I hope they don't test my resolve later in the season. But I'm willing to play Urza Master here and find the glass a third full, and instead of 2/3 empty. So that's where I am.
I think that's quaint. I wanted to like this episode better, and it's the first time watching Trek where I've found myself searching the entire episode for a reason to like it more than I'm not liking it. And I have to say I'm flabbergasted because I am ever the optimist, and this one beat the tar out of me. It's like I just can't. And historically, I do hate child actors,
Yes.
so it tracks.
It's right.
But until we venture out again with the crew of NCC 1701 deeper into season 3, hopefully into better territory, which we still have a few very well-known episodes to go to, I will say to you all, live long and prosper.